The wait is finally over. The gameplay trailer for Poppy Playtime 4 has been released, and in a few days the game will be available. We have seen the areas, but before diving into the Playtime dungeons, we need to analyze piece by piece the secrets of this trailer to be sure not to miss anything. The trailer is full of very important elements, so it's even difficult to find a detail that stands out more than the others. Let's start with the confirmation that is finally given to us here, which partially disproves what we thought. In Chapter 4 we will indeed have an ally, but it won't be Dr. Sawyer at all. In fact, he will be the main enemy of Safe Haven, and from what we are told at the beginning of the trailer, we discover that he even works for the prototype. It is not entirely clear how they became practically friends. It might even be that they are not, and that their relationship is just a convenience alliance. But we have to emphasize that until recently, Sawyer seems to be at odds with 1006. However, it seems that the prototype is not responsible for the Doctor transformation, and all his anger is directed at Playtime and its employees. We see, among other things, a Sawyer even more unsettling than he seems in previous trailer, who, in addition to being able to watch us from the cameras, can use a series of bodies that could attack us from any corner of these eerie undergrounds. Bodies composed of a robotic base and a television as head, all covered with strips of white fabric. As unsettling as the original. Based on what we saw in the trailer, their way of attacking us will be very similar to that of the Endos from Security Breach or Miss the Light from Chapter 3. They seem to be creatures that will attack us from the shadows and that we can only avoid by illuminating them. But whether they can move or not, certainly, as Sawyer also says in the trailer, there won't be any place where we can hide from him. The problem, however, as we well know, is not only Sawyer. If we manage to find a place where we could actually escape the Thousand Eyes of Doctor, we would still have to deal with his extension. In this trailer, we finally see Sawyer's big dog in action, and it's anything but affectionate. We don't know if it will attack us only in certain areas, or if it will be lurking throughout the game, but it could be a really dangerous enemy. As the reports said, it may be dumb, but its strength and agility are extremely developed, and it's totally devoted to Sawyer. We also have an idea of the first meeting we might have with him. In one of the latest screenshots, we saw a room where we will need to insert some batteries. While from behind the glass panel, Yarnaby will attack us. All normal, but in the trailer we see the room before that attack from another angle. From this angle we can see that beyond the glass there is a door labeled PPCOCC, which presumably might mean Playtime Co. Containment Chamber. Therefore a containment chamber, or a cell if you prefer. A cell that in that sequence opens. At that moment, Yarnaby is obviously not there yet, and almost certainly will come out from that enormous door. As a first encounter, it will certainly have an impact, although let's be honest, if things were to go like in the trailer dedicated to him, it would be much more exciting and unsettling. Regardless of how we end up meeting, Yarnaby will be there, always ready to hunt us. He is too stupid to think about anything else, in short, the perfect subordinate. And, as if Yarnaby wasn't enough, we'll meet more enemies. Maybe during all this time dedicated to Sawyer, they have been overlooked. But let's not forget about the nightmare critters. The counterpart of the smiling critters will be present and will do everything to hinder us. Unfortunately, we have not seen any bigger body version of them. That would have been really creepy. And if they are not actually present, it would be a great waste of potential. However, we can be sure that we will have countless little ones underfoot hungry beasts that will not give us a break. And based on what they showed in the trailer, the nightmare critters could make our life in the underground really difficult. With some unexpected allies, moreover, because it seems that we will also meet some mini-Aggies like those from Waka Wagi. In short, the rocket launcher hand could become our best friend. Fortunately, despite the danger posed by our enemies, we can also rely on what appears to be the highest number of allies ever seen. Let's start with someone we didn't expect to see again, Kissy Missy. The pink version of Huggy Wuggy is alive and well. We have absolutely no idea how she managed to save herself or how Poppy managed to save her, but thanks to the trailer, we know that we will see both of them again. However, Kissy has sustained some clearly visible injuries. Her body in some areas appears to be without fur and covered with some bandages. Her right side also seems to have been burned. Instead of pink fur, we now see black areas. It might at best simply show the lower layer of the experiment, but it wouldn't be surprising if those were burns. What matters, however, is that she is alive and that she especially wants to help us along with Poppy. We will return to talk about the perfect doll with red hair shortly, due to a detail that made us think. But for now, let's continue the list of allies. Ollie will join us again. In the trailer, he is given just 2 seconds where you can hear his voice. But he certainly hasn't abandoned us. And given the context, we might stop considering him a potential enemy. Sawyer has now revealed himself and spoken to us without hiding his identity. So we can think that Ollie is indeed Ollie, and that his intentions are not bad. Perhaps some time will have to pass before seeing him again, but if they should confirm him as one of the good ones, it will be a big step forward. Finally, we have the last ally, the new ally, which gives the trailer its title. It is not, as some speculated, Daddy Long Legs. Unfortunately, we had, because it would have had very little sense. It's an entirely new character, Dewey the Dogman. Okay, new is a figure of speech because by now leaks about him were everywhere, but finally we can give him a face and, above all, consider him one of our team. Dewey has some interesting properties. It is a creature made of plasticine that can move through any opening and then reassemble on the other side. In the trailer, we even see it dissolve in the middle of a grate, only to become whole again once it reaches the floor. It also answers a question Mob have been pondering for some time. In fact, we see the 3 ends on Dewey's belly, the yellow, the red and the orange one, which we first saw in the now distant summer of 2024. The Dogman, however, had an extremely important role within that hell.
In the trailer we are shown a very important mural that represents the reality of that place. A place where experiments, as Dewey himself tells us, were practically tortured, deprived of food and constantly chased. However, they had identified Dewey as their savior. The big friend made of plasticine seemed and still seems to be one of the few beings endowed with kindness in that place. The image we mentioned earlier shows exactly this. The only safe place in that red hell is in the arms of Dewey, within which we are shown the true safe haven, the safe refuge of the smiling critters. The curious thing is that outside that refuge is someone we know very well. On one side of the drawing is depicted our very own Poppy. Above her, a red X has been drawn and next to it the words "She abandoned us." Come on, we've all always had doubts about Poppy. But we always tried to put them aside, to think that it was just our paranoia and that the doll actually prevented us from escaping its second chapter just to destroy the prototype. However, this drawing certainly doesn't work in her favor. Here, Poppy is presented to us as someone who abandoned her own kind, her own friends, probably to save herself. Or maybe that's what they think. There might also be the case that Poppy had no choice. In the 3rd chapter, she herself tells us that during the hour of joy, she was captured and put in the cage from which we freed her at the end of the 1st one. Her escape, if we can call it that, perhaps was not voluntary. Maybe she simply didn't have any opportunity to help the others. And now, returning to that place, she will try to redeem herself. Also because otherwise it would be quite foolish to decide to go down among those who consider her a traitor. If she really was one, she would probably be a bit more careful and keep herself safe. We certainly cannot rule out that the 4th chapter was specifically aimed to reinforce those doubts we have about her. The idea of not being able to trust such an important ally. It would only increase our sense of helplessness in the face of the Playtime evil. However, one of the places in this trailer that remains most impressive is probably the prison. A real detention center complete with a courtyard and control towers. We found it quite curious that games like basketball were present inside because it's simply difficult to imagine experiments like Braun throwing a ball into a basket. But evidently, the courtyard was also reserved for beings with different characteristics who could therefore play freely. We hope to find clarifications on this because for now, it's making a great meme base for the community. Anyway, such a center gives the idea of a maximum security facility where experiments were certainly kept under very strict surveillance and undoubtedly subjected to torture. After all, Poppy herself defined the place as the playtime hell and especially told us that the company did everything to make it so. Inside the cells, as we already suspected, the famous red smoke was dispersed, a substance we became well acquainted with in the 3rd chapter. We do not know if in this context it was used only to keep the experiments in check or if it also served to torture them with the terrifying nightmares that Claire Harper described to us at the beginning of Deep Sleep. One thing is certain. Whoever was locked inside that prison lived through a real hell on earth. Mob finally surprised us by showing for the first time, excluding the skeleton and catnap's totem, human bodies. The staff of the place met a terrifying fate, and apparently the areas in the 4th chapter will be full of lifeless bodies of the employees of the location. For example, those we see at the beginning of the trailer are positioned in ways that tell a terrible past. Poppy had already told us that after the Hour of Joy, the bodies of the workers were moved to the lower floors to feed the experiments that inhabited them. But since the 4th is not the last chapter, we might expect to see things that are truly worse than this. Fortunately for us, however, it is precisely from one of these bodies that we recovered the dear old red hand. We do not know if the new one has any characteristics that will facilitate our exploration, but if it is the same as the one we had previously, it will not allow us to do anything special, except perhaps open one day doors of rooms that have remained unexplored until today. The only area of the trailer that seems almost intact, although we wouldn't bet on it, is the one that could look like a sort of kitchen or a laboratory to the eye, maybe more likely the latter, with white tiles, steel shelves and so on. Hanging from the ceiling of this room, we see black sacks, and judging by the shapes, we know the content. It is certainly not a mystery, but unlike the bodies scattered along the corridors, these have been carefully wrapped and hanged. Why? An attempt to preserve their content, perhaps? Maybe those inside them are subjects chosen for reasons we don't yet know, but that will be revealed to us later in the 4th chapter. Certainly, the experiments, as far as we know, needed people who were still alive, so these either weren't transformed in time, or they are the famous nourishment Poppy spoke about. Before closing, it's very important to focus on one thing. We finally see Pianosaurus in action. Initially, it didn't convince us 100% as an enemy. It seemed a bit like a fool with that keyboard instead of teeth and its wide head. However, seeing it run towards us to obviously do us no good scared us a bit. Especially in an area like the one shown in the trailer, completely dark except for a small light source. Seeing the teeth illuminated coming from the darkness followed by the experiment running could definitely give us a few moments of anxiety. One thing we must say, and we will certainly explore it further in an upcoming discussion video, the 4th chapter of Poppy Playtime is definitely one of the highest points reached by Mascot horror. Mob is being quite brave in introducing certain elements. Of course, we're not talking about scenarios like Silent Hill or Resident Evil, but considering the genre, it's a turn we're very happy to see. And we hope that Poppy will learn the respect it deserves here too. Maybe finally stopping being labeled as a series for kids once and for all. As always, we thank you and remind you that January 30th is getting closer. We'll be waiting for you on the channel for the gameplay that will be released simultaneously with the launch of Chapter 4. And we remind you that we will be live on Twitch the same day to analyze it together. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like and share it, and we'll see you in the next video now with Poppy Playtime 4.